They want to keep their jobs, and they think the way to do that is to print money. I happen to think it's going to be a disaster in the end, but that's all they know.
Yeah.
They will borrow. They borrow as much as they can, but they will print as much. It's not the only solution. The other solution is to bite the bullet and admit the mistakes and go through some pain. You know, in the early 20s, we had this problem in America, and in America they raised interest rates. They balanced the budget. Had a terrible 2 or 3 years, but then the 20s were a fantastic economic decade for the United States.
Yeah.
In Scandinavia in the early 90s, they had this problem. They bit the bullet. They had a lot of pain, but Scandinavia's done well in the past 30 years. Japan, on the other hand, in the early 90s, oh no, nobody will fail. Print, print, print. Well, you know, the Japanese have had 3 lost decades because they did the wrong thing. So in my view, if you accept reality, you'll wind up better off.
Some of the emerging economies have unsustainable debt levels, and giving them an avenue of relief makes a lot of sense, and I believe it is not in the interest of the so-called developed world to have the undeveloped or less developed or emerging world with unsustainable debt. So in that sense, the DSSI has been a good initiative. It hasn't been conclusively formulated yet, and a lot of the countries I've been talking to, they were wondering, okay, if I take this, what will the rating agencies do? Will they put me on selective default? What would that mean? What would my bond investors say about this? Because a lot of these eligible countries also issued bonds. They do not live on concessional debt. They have, in some cases, established a pretty decent reputation, actually, in the international bond markets, and have a fairly large, in some instances, too large layer of commercial debt as well. So investor relations, relation with rating agencies, or generally, of course, intercreditor relations are very important. When you do debt restructuring, in whether this is at corporate level or at sovereign level, it is, if you were able to put all the creditors into one bucket, most debt restructurings would be quite easy.
You said undeveloped, cannot unsustainable levels of debt. Japan cannot continue this way. America cannot continue. Britain cannot continue this way. It's not just emerging markets. Everybody likes to say, oh, emerging markets, but the major markets have gigantic, staggering numbers. If you sit down and figure them out, there's no way they can pay them off. 100 years ago, in the 1920s, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number 2. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. IMF had to fly into London and bail them out. So they went from the single richest, most powerful nation in the world in 50 years to totally bankrupt. So don't think this cannot happen. It has happened throughout history. It is happening again. Well, if you have inflation, interest rates are going to go through the roof.
Exactly.
And that's going to bankrupt a lot of cities, even in Germany. Yeah. There are cities that are in trouble. So if Germany's in trouble, my goodness, Indiana, Illinois, some of the states in the US and cities, I mean, this is going to be a mess when interest rates go higher. And inflation would lead to higher interest rates and disaster. I still own US dollars because my view is that when the next turmoil comes, and we will have bear markets again, that people are going to look for a safe haven. There are not many safe havens left anymore, and so they're going to, but for historic reasons, the US dollar is not a safe haven, but people think it is. So the dollar will go up and it'll get overpriced. It could turn into a bubble, depending on how bad the problems are, at which point I hope I'm smart enough to sell my US dollars and go somewhere else. You're probably going to say, well, where? That's a very good question. I have a couple of possibilities, but we will see.
Yeah.
I don't know where. I don't see another safe haven now for most investors when things really get bad. And that's why I own US dollars. It's not a safe haven, but people think it is.
True. Obviously, precious metals are rising again. Comparing the silver to the gold market, I see quite a bit of appreciation in the silver market. Would you agree that there's room to the upside? And if you have any target in mind?
Well, I own both. I haven't bought either since a few months, but I plan to buy more during this correction. I don't know when, but I will probably, I know I will buy more silver than gold at today's prices, because silver is still down 50% from its all-time high. Gold is, what, 15% from its all-time high. So silver is much cheaper on a historic base. I will buy both, but I presume I'll buy more silver.
Would you see also that the silver prices, the spot prices, are really reflecting the silver market? Talking about supply and demand? Or?
Well, maybe you're manipulating the market, and maybe they're not reflecting supply and demand. But for the most part, you know, the silver market's an awfully big market, and the gold market's an awfully big market. If you can manipulate it, hooray. But I trust the market more than I trust the manipulators.
Because there were some rumors that are saying that due to cryptocurrencies, there's not as much inflow into gold and silver because lots of money goes into the crypto, especially Bitcoin environment right now. Would you agree with this, that this causes the markets to be a bit different?
Well, I have no idea how much is in cryptos. I do read what you read. There are a lot of money has gone into cryptos, and so yes, clearly some of that money is by people who think that they have a safeguard or a way to protect themselves. I'm a little more skeptical than that, but we will see. I prefer gold and silver, maybe because I'm old-fashioned. I have reasons for preferring gold and silver, but maybe crypto is going to save the day. I doubt it. I doubt it very, very seriously. A couple of the reasons I don't own any cryptocurrencies is because I don't trust the governments either, but I do know that if cryptocurrencies become successful as currencies, as money, governments will outlaw them, because governments don't like losing their monopoly. Maybe all the people who don't trust governments are right, and they can go for a crypto. But I know that history shows that the governments are not trustworthy, and they will just put you out of business. Now, the crypto guys say, oh, we're smarter than the government, and they are. They're much smarter than the government, but the government's got the guns. The government's got the tanks. Crypto guys don't have any tanks, don't have any guns.